a second before I introduce CJ. This is a strange time for all of us. I mean, I just saw in the Wall Street Journal this morning, you know, less than a month and a half ago, we were almost at full employment in this country. And there were 16 million unemployment claims that were made in the last month. So we all know that this is a very odd time for everybody. And it's a scary time. It's a scary time for people who have been laid off. It's a scary time for people who have been furloughed. It's a scary time for folks that don't know if there's going to be a job waiting for them at the end of the tunnel here. But I do also want to tell you, I've heard from a lot of job seekers. I have spoken to literally hundreds of job seekers over the past month. And by far, most people are taking this time as an opportunity to dust off their resume, an opportunity to do some serious self-introspection about what it is that they want to do moving forward. And a lot of people are telling me, this is, even though it's a scary time, it's giving me the free time that I never had, that I've always wanted, even to consider these types of things. The other thing that you need to know is that there are still jobs being posted. Clearly, it's not as many as there were, and clearly, as one of the most dynamic economies in the country, in Colorado, the types of the number of jobs have certainly drastically declined. But if you go to my website, Andrew Hudson's jobs list, you will still see that there are jobs being posted. If you go to any of the other major job boards, you'll see that there are jobs being posted. And also, this is another opportunity for you to work on your networking skills, to kind of tap into that hidden job market where there are jobs available that might not be posted. So saying all of that, the last thing I want to say before I introduce CJ is, don't let these normal frustrations and anxieties that come with job seeking get you down. They're common. Everybody goes through these things. And, if you have been on my seminars before, you'll know I'll say that one of the most common things that occurs is that people get into what I call the job seeking quicksand. And basically, this is what it looks like. You're a mid to senior level job seeker, and you've been laid off, you've been furloughed, and you're applying for jobs, and you get rejected. Rejection is part of the job seeking world. And it's very hard not to take it personally, and we do take it personally. But the person that you wake up looking in the mirror at every morning has got to be the same person that is represented on your resume, that has skills, that has successes, that has accomplishments, that has education, that has this trajectory of different jobs and promotions. All of that stuff is that makes you who you are as a job seeker. If you're looking in the mirror and you see a person who you think is too old, overqualified, underqualified, wants too much money, doesn't think that they know how to do a resume or a cover letter, that's a person that even you don't recognize. The person you need to recognize is that same person who's on your resume, same person that you are going to be introducing yourself to other employers, and that red hot confidence in all of those things that you did throughout your career has got to be right front and center. So we're going to talk a lot more about this today, but again, keep optimistic, keep moving forward, keep taking risks, don't be afraid to make cold calls, and keep reminding yourself of the strengths, the skills, the experiences, all that stuff that make you who you are valuable. Now, a couple housekeeping things. We're going to have a discussion here. You can answer or you can ask questions. There's online, and we will take questions as best we can. The other thing is, please keep tuned in. We're going to be doing more of these seminars. I'm going to have a couple of other career experts coming on in the next couple of weeks, and just keep your eye on for an email or on my Facebook page or on my website. Again, andrewhudsonsjobslist.com. And I am always happy to have discussions with people. So if you think of a question after the seminar is over that you didn't think of during it, or we weren't able to get to it, my email is ahudson@ahjobslist.com, and I'm happy to have a discussion with you or try to help answer your questions. All right, with all of that said, it is my great honor to introduce CJ Juleff. And I got to know CJ, a couple, I don't know, 9 months ago. And I went and gave a seminar at the Jefferson County Workforce Center. And I was just blown away. I mean, I knew that the workforce centers were important, and we have like 52 of them across the state. And I'm going to let CJ talk about what the workforce centers are. But I will just tell you, this is a ringing endorsement of the workforce centers. They're absolute godsends for job seekers, and particularly right now. So, CJ, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and how you got into this world of job seeking, and tell us a lot more about the workforce centers and what you're doing, not only now, because you're doing a lot of important things now online, but also just in general. What are the workforce centers set up to do?
Great, Sandra, and thanks so much for this opportunity. I came by this position, honestly, as I like to say, which is that I have been in the HR field, I've been in an independent consultant, and all along the line, I've really sort of passionate about how to help people get to their next best opportunity. So having said that, when I had the opportunity to join Jefferson County Business and Workforce Center, first as a contractor a number of years ago, and then moving through training in the career services and back into training, it is just an exciting system, if you will. So across the state, as you mentioned, and across the country, there are workforce centers whose purpose is really to help job seekers. The other side of what we do is that we work with employers. So it's a beautiful opportunity to match talent and with business. And so that's what we're all about across the state. Is we have sort of separated, but we're all working collaboratively. We have business services teams who go out and work with employers to set up apprenticeships, to set up internships, to really understand what the skills gaps they're seeing are with the job seekers. And then we have the full range of options for job seekers, everything from workshops to one-on-one appointments. And you're going to find that across the state. I'm very proud of all of my colleagues. And you mentioned we're in a very interesting time. So many of us across the state took this opportunity to suddenly work remotely and to make things available to our customers. And we like to use this expression, meet customers where they're at. Well, most of our customers are at home. So inside their houses, virtually and by phone. So I do want to appreciate the opportunity to sort of toot our own horn, but our website is www.jeffco.us, and then you can go to the services tab, and underneath that you can go to the Career Center Services. You'll find a phone number, 303-271-4755. That phone is being manned by live people during the work hours of 8 to 5, and we're also checking the voicemail after and before hours to be able to return any calls. But you can get some insights, some advice, some coaching, some counseling, you name it. We're there to support you in this very interesting time. We also have an opportunity for you to, at that same site, you'll notice that you can make virtual appointments. We're very excited about this. You can just book online, and you can meet with a career specialist, a workforce specialist, either over the phone or using a virtual platform. And so you can schedule at your convenience. A calendar will pop up, and you can go ahead and pick your time, and we can make that happen. As Andrew mentioned, there are hiring companies that are hiring. And so on that same page, on that same website, you'll be able to see some hiring flyers. Listing businesses that are hiring. As I mentioned, our business services team is out and about contacting employers to make certain that we know exactly what their needs are and who is hiring. So connectingcolorado.com is the state system that we compile all of the open jobs. And our team went through just recently and cleaned it up, if you will, went back and made certain that since this strange opportunity of sheltering at home, contacted those employers to say, are you still hiring? So it's a pretty up-to-date list that we're very proud of. So that's exciting. We also do a series of workshops that are done now remotely. So my training services team have been working about 24/7, like the rest of us, to make certain that you can access what you need. So it's everything from career exploration. And Andrew, I love the fact that you mentioned, I like to say people are sort of sitting back and recalibrating and sort of trying to think through, now that I'm home, I'm not so sure I ever really liked that job. So
Right.
why don't I think about something else? So we have career exploration. We can get you in touch with some really great assessments. We're doing job search tips. We're doing interviewing, LinkedIn. But my favorite one is tomorrow afternoon. It's how to prepare for video interviews and sound and look like a pro. So many of us are now figuring out that, oh my gosh, I really can't be interviewing while lying on my bed, but that's the only place I have in my house that looks okay. Or some of us are wildly cleaning off our kitchen counters in hopes that no one can see behind us and so forth. So that's really a quick overview of what we have to offer the job seeker. And in addition to that, there are some opportunities through some of our federal funding um, avenues to possibly provide some training, if that makes sense, and also some supportive services.
Oh, fantastic. Now, um, tell us a little bit about you. Tell me about your career trajectory, how you ended up getting involved and interested in becoming an expert in job seeking.
Sure, happy to do that. So it's a long story, which I will make brief. But I started out my career after college as an auto mechanic because I figured why not? It was a non-traditional job for a woman, and I will say, and I apologize to all of my employers since then, that it was the best job I ever had because once you get a car tuned up, it hums, and oddly enough, people don't hum enough. So I loved being an auto mechanic. I moved into construction, and happy to say there are about 8 garages still standing in Steamboat Springs that I tied rebar and poured concrete for. And then I had to get what my family thought was perhaps a real job, which as I moved into financial services. So got into banking. I call myself a recovering banker. I never quite got out of that. But I discovered that what I really liked about banking was really talking about personal financial literacy. So parlayed a banking career into not only training and human resources, but became very involved in personal financial literacy, especially with young people. So happy to say that, and a colleague just reached out to me on the chat line. So I'm excited, Jane, shout out to you, that we work together at Young American Center for Financial Education, which actually, Andrew, is where I first met you many moons ago at a celebration for young entrepreneurs back in the day when you were with Frontier Airlines. So
Oh, yeah.
we go back a little ways, but we were only 12 then anyway. So, but that opportunity, all through my career, I've been really in the position of staff development or and mentoring, which I have always been honored and humbled to be chosen as a mentor. And that really is around, so oftentimes career coaching and asking, helping people sort of find out what are their strengths, what do they do best. And I've also always fallen into been fortunate to be in management positions and have found myself either in the HR position of hiring in individuals at all levels, or being a hiring manager at an organization where that was my role as a manager, and the HR department was a screening tool. So I found that I perfected those interviewing skills. So I wanted to give back, and this was an opportunity to be on the other side of the table and work with job seekers and assist them with really, I've often been nicely accused of being pretty darn direct. So that's my role, is to really work with individuals and get them excited about their strengths and all that they bring to the table. And we're so quick to be self-effacing. We've been socialized, so we've been taught not to talk and brag about who we are and what we've done. And then you come into my office and I want you to tell me why I should hire you, and you stumble and think, well, I don't know. But that's my excitement. I really love working with staff and facilitators and career specialists and really creating that environment where we are supporting and we're on that journey with you about, wow, I can't believe what you've done. Oh my gosh, we need to put that in an accomplishment statement on your resume. Let's do it. So that's the excitement that I have and passion for this work. But thanks for letting me ramble.
I know it's great, and I tell you what, it's a great connection to another element I think of the job search, which is I always tell people that it's important to take an inventory of your skills, of what you have done, not only in your most recent job, but in terms of skills that you've had throughout your life. And I love the analogy you kind of inadvertently dropped in there about how you used to be an auto mechanic, and you know how to build buildings. And I mean, honestly, those are the kinds of skills that have, I think, come in really handy for you in your career, particularly when you are looking at and working with a job seeker. And I see this in my life as well, working with job seekers. Usually, the engine doesn't need to be rebuilt. There just needs to be a tune-up. Maybe the spark plugs need to be changed, or maybe the something simple. The windshield wipers need to be changed, but it's not as if. But a lot of people come in thinking, "Oh my gosh, I need to have my entire engine rebuilt," and that's usually not the case. And it also gets to your point about us not being willing to take ownership of what we have done in our lives. There's a level of humility that is just pounded into us from the minute that we are able to talk. You have to be humble. You have to make sure that everything is shared with the team, and all of that stuff is good to a degree. But when you're in a job interview, they're not interviewing your team, and they want to know what it is that you have accomplished, what it is that you bring to the table that is valuable to them, that makes the connection from everything that you bring to doing the job that they're asking you to do. But it is a hard thing to do, and I've seen it not only with just your average job seekers. I've seen it with salespeople and marketing people who are experts at being able to talk about products. But when it comes to you being the product in the marketplace of job seekers, it's a very, very different type of a thing. So let me ask you another thing. How do you, what do you do to keep job seekers optimistic and keep them motivated? It's one of the things that I think we have as folks that work with job seekers. This idea that we understand it's scary out there. There's rejection. There's all of these things. But what are the kind of triggers that you help job seekers recognize to keep motivated?
That's a great question, Andrew. And we've really, thought through. And one of the things that we want to be clear is that this is overwhelming. So anyone who says to themselves, well, I need to rebuild that engine, I'm going to sit down and spend 8 hours on my resume. We're like, oh, wow, don't do it. That is like torture. Chunk it out. So maybe work on your skills summary, go take a walk, do some exercise, come back and do your employment history. So the idea is to move it strategically, but to give yourself a little bit of grace and dignity in this time. So we like to suggest that people pick up, one or two things. What are you going to do today? So we sort of approach every job seeker with curiosity. So it might be that I would say, so Andrew, I'm curious, how's your network? Have you reached out to anyone? And then that's all I really want you to do, because that's fun and that's exciting. But I'll tell you what my sort of favorite thing to encourage people to do is to, I call it creating a master skill bucket list. So that begins to build my confidence, because sometimes I forget that I was an auto mechanic. Sometimes I forget that I've had my own consulting business for 20 years. So I get caught up in the moment and I'm only thinking about what did I do the last 3 years. Well, that's not my expansive skills. So I encourage people to, whether you're a flip chart person or an index card person, or you're on the kitchen table with moving Post-its, just sit back and really give yourself the opportunity to go, wow, I forgot, 15 years ago, I created a curriculum that is still standing, and it's called International Town, and it's about global economics, and I had an amazing team. Well, that might not be what I just finished doing 2 years ago, but those were some skills that I forgot I had, perhaps. So if I create this skill bucket, and what I'm talking about, Andrew, is not job descriptions. So if I was a cashier, there are a lot of skills in being a cashier, even if I was 16 when I did it. But I talk about cashiering. So when I was cashiering as a skill bucket, well, that's making change, which half the world can't do anymore because they don't know how to count money. And it's, giving receipts, it's making exchanges, it's all things like that. Then customer
For service. Yeah.
is huge. And sometimes those skill buckets sort of, there are no real fine lines and boundaries. So I might have some customer service things in customer service, and then I might have them show up again in project management. I might have it show up again in financial analysis. But when I do that for myself, I can sit back and I'm just all by myself and I begin to pat myself on the back and I get excited about what I've done and what I bring to the table. And it helps me get over that business of, oh, really, I didn't know. I mean, anyone would have done that in that job. That's not true. I
Yeah.
did it differently.
One of the things that I encourage job seekers to do, even before getting into their resume, is to answer the question, what do you want to do?
Absolutely.
And a lot of times they put the cart before the horse and they dive into their resume without answering that question. And so it's a very interesting thing because when you ask the question, what is it that you want to do? What usually comes out is the low hanging fruit. This is what I just did, so I must have to go after what I just did.
Mm-hmm.
If you dig that question out and say, if you had your opportunity to do something that included your passions and it included your skills and it included the kinds of things that you want to go to work excited about and leave feeling as if you've accomplished something great, and all of a sudden the brains and the chemicals in the brain start working overtime and it becomes a very different thing. How do you keep job seekers focused and focused in a couple of ways? Because one of the things that you also hit it on was um, I encourage people to not use job boards as a crutch because it's so difficult if you spend all of your morning or all day just randomly sending out resumes to job postings on job boards. And this is coming from a guy who runs a successful job board, but they're used incorrectly. What I call them is prospect boards. And I say don't 25% of your time, your job search time, is used for those job boards. But if you're in your pajamas at 10 o'clock in the morning, just madly sending out resumes, it's like fishing for a whale with a worm. And I think that one of the big strategies, and I'll quit rambling here in a second. One of the big strategies that I see successful job seekers who get interviews and get job offers is this level of focus. And this level of focus about what it is I want to do. Because when you have that, then that is transferred to the resume. It's transferred to answering the question, tell me about yourself. It's transferred to networking in terms of the kinds of companies that you want to work for and that you're going to be making cold calls or just even to the people that working in those industries. So how do you get that message across, and what are strategies for keeping focused?
That's I love what you said, Andrew, because we're singing the same from the same page. One of the things that I want to preface this by is that I probably have had the opportunity with the various companies, and oh, by the way, I've had 28 jobs and 3 careers in my short life. So I have played this game in a number of fashion and ways. But where that focus comes in is really understanding that as a hiring manager, I never rejected anyone. I declined to make them an offer, and my choosing to decline to make them an offer was that they weren't a great fit for a variety of reasons that we can talk about later. But why I say that is that as a job seeker, we do feel rejected. And I want you to understand that that is not any hiring manager's goal. It is to find the right fit. And so we decline to make offers to individuals. But having said that, without a focus, I can become incredibly dejected because I feel rejected because I sent out 30 resumes in an hour and I didn't hear back. So that focus for us is really, I use a phrase that some people laugh at, and but I talk about flirting with the pretty ones, which means you are in the driver's seat. What 5 companies are you interested in that you could contribute to, that use your skills, that allow you to be passionate about what they do? And I know that that doesn't, that sounds like, oh, that's crazy. I mean, what if they don't have any open jobs? But that's the beauty of being strategic. If I'm focusing on 5 companies, my success is far greater than if I'm sending out 300 resumes. But it does beg the question, Andrew, that you said, what do I want to do? And sometimes we say, the world is changing so quickly. It's not that you are going to get, what do you want to do next, maybe? And what's going to get you to perhaps that place you want to be at. So sometimes we do take what I call sort of a plan B job, because it's going to give us the skill set to get that job we really are going after. But it is that focus. And one of our questions that's been asked is, I don't know what to do. Where's a good place to figure that out? Again, there are a myriad assessments available, but we would be happy to share with you one that we like at Jefferson County Business and Workforce Center, which is Pathway U. What's different about it, Andrew, is that it isn't a skills assessment. So many assessments out there are for skills. This asks the question of what are your values? What kind of work environment do you want to be in? What kind of people do you want to work with? And it begins to help you see things perhaps that you've never asked yourself. You just applied because, well, there it is again. It's that executive position. The other thing that I would say is that you may not be a fan out there of Richard Bowles and What Color is My Parachute, but he does have a beautiful, that one piece of paper, he calls it, and it's called the flower petal. And it asks you those kinds of questions that you're talking about, Andrew. What kind of people do I want to work with? I asked a job seeker that recently, and they said, well, I don't know, give me some choices. And I said, oh, no. You have to figure that out. What kind of people do you want to work with? And so some of this is that focus on going back a little bit and saying, what do I want to do? Once I can get that, then I can start focusing on the 5 companies that absolutely make my heart sing. And that's different than just responding to job boards. And I appreciate, because I love your job board. It's one of the few that I recommend. But that's a lot of time sitting at your computer when you could be networking, you could be upskilling, learning skills, you could be figuring out how to do things remotely these days. So I think that focus is so important. And we just talk about narrow it down, 5 companies, not 500.
Yeah. I tell you, there's Linda Sollers. Do you know Linda? Yeah. So Linda is one of the great reinvention experts. And she works primarily with mid-career professionals who are looking to do something different. They've reached a point in their career where they're not sure what they want to do, but they have, they've earned all these skills over the years and so forth. And her own story is very interesting and plays to what you were talking about, which she was a VP at Quest, and she got laid off, and she went back to college and got a degree in human management or human development. And she wanted to be in career services. She wanted to do something to help job seekers, similar to what you're doing. And she was having a hard time. She had focused in on Jefferson County government. She really wanted to work for Jeffco. And she would get letters saying thanks, but no thanks, and just was having a hard time getting some traction. And so instead of giving up, or instead of just constantly sending in resumes all the time, she went and stood in front of a King Soopers. And for 2 days straight, she stood there dressed professionally with her portfolio full of resumes. And as people walked in, she would hand out her resume. And she had her pitch, little 2-minute pitch, who I am, why I'm doing this, and then the all-important ask, which is so important in terms of marketing and selling yourself. You have to have an ask. And her ask was simply, can you take my resume and give it to the HR person in Jefferson County government? Some people gave her the stink eye and walked away. But she said most people were very friendly, and they had a brother, cousin, wife, son, someone that they knew that worked at Jefferson County government, or they worked there themselves. Did that for 2 days straight. Didn't hear a word for the first week. The second week, there was a phone call, 8 o'clock in the morning. Lady, I don't know who you are, but this is the head of HR, Jefferson County, and I've got 37 copies of your resume on my desk. And she ended up getting a job that way. Now, if it was as easy as just saying, everyone should just go to King Supers and hand out their resume. But my whole point is that, keeping motivated means feeling like you're progressing your job search and that you are becoming a better job seeker. And so I'm very much with you. I mean, I always try to tell people that, choose 4 or 5 things that you're going to do that day. And maybe it's an hour on job boards and you're prospecting. You're finding jobs that fit within your focus and within your skill set and companies that, are important as part of your job search. Spend a couple of hours making the all important networking calls. And I know for a lot of people listening to this, that is really taking people out of their comfort zone. And it's not easy to make cold calls. It's not easy to call up people and say, hey, I'm unemployed. I'm looking for a job. Can you help me out? But it's critical. It's such an important part of the job search. Spend a couple of hours working on your resumes and on your cover letters. Maybe you can even go to a networking event from your professional association or spend some time at the Jefferson County Workforce Center. All of those different things that, as opposed to just, treading water, sending out random resumes, you're actually doing things. And every point that you have to talk about yourself, every point that you have that is progressing your job search, you're becoming a better job seeker. But at the end of the day, write down the next 5 things you want to do the next day and turn that shit off. Turn it off. Don't be so obsessed or enjoy your family, go on a walk, go have an ice cream cone. You did something great today. And I've really found that, that's a big part of this is also the attitude part of it and being able to really feel like you have done something and that you've accomplished something. Another thing that you had said that I think is so important. Job seekers, I know some people are like, look, I just need a job. I need to pay the rent. I need to pay my kids' college tuition or pay the car for the car payment or whatever. And I get that. I totally get that. I've asked job seekers, tell me what were the qualities of your most favorite job? What was it about your favorite job that made it your most favorite job? And everybody has different answers, but they fall along the line of good leadership, great culture, great team environment. My immediate boss gave us they gave us the ability to do what we could do with our own skills. Really felt that the company was transparent, they were honest, they were ethical, all of these different things. Not once did anyone ever say to me, oh, it was such a great job because I got paid so much money. Which, that's part of respect, obviously, and that's part of the whole package in terms of compensating people for what they're worth. But it wasn't like the number one quality as to why I loved going to that job every day. And so I would say to people who are thinking about reinvention or thinking about, doing something else, you also have to be realistic about all of the things that are important to you as it relates to your job. And I always say there's this threshold in terms of your salary that you can't go below. And only you know that, and it might not be as high as what you're getting, but you certainly can't go below that. And so when, people are thinking about these jobs and thinking about, what is it that I want to do next, it can become very overwhelming because it's like, well, I've never done that, so I'm going to have to start at a lower level. Or, it's the type of job that's not going to pay me what I'm paying right now, and that's a problem. Yeah, it could be a problem. But that's just part of the consideration of everything that you're thinking about as you start to pursue that job. And I know somebody had asked the question, I'm mid-career and looking to pivot. I don't know what I want to do. Where's a good place to start to figure that out? Hopefully we've helped you answer some of that. I would also recommend Finding Your North Star. It's kind of an older book, but it's a really good book about, figuring out, what you want to do with your life, primarily surrounding careers. And there's another really good book called What Do I Want to Do with My Life? And it has a bunch of short essays from people who they were doing one thing and they decided to do something else. And a lot of it is in the nonprofit world. A lot of it is in terms of them wanting to, make a big difference. But there's other resources like that as well. let me ask you, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of job seeking. How do resumes influence your chance of getting interviewed in a job offer?
Ah, I have to preface this. I'm always quick to tell job seekers there's no such thing as the resume police. But if there were, I'd like to be chief. So I do have some biases, so I have to share that with you. I think the biggest thing is for people to recognize that it's a marketing tool. So the legal document is the application, which has to have all of the dates and all of that jazz on it. But this is your marketing tool. This is your brand. So that sometimes makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable because it sounds like there's some sort of smoke and mirrors going on. But the reality is that um, I'm looking at a targeted resume. So that's what's going to get an interview. If you're still using a template that you're applying to 5 different companies and you're thinking, well, it's the same industry. So, it's the same resume. Those days are gone. So wherever you're applying, I'm going to encourage you to really pay attention to the job posting because each company is going to be just a little different in what they're looking for. So that's the targeted piece. And that's the other reason I say, oh my gosh, you can't possibly be sending out 300 resumes in a week because you don't have time to target 300
Yeah.
resumes. So that's why we scale it back and say, find those companies that you really want to work for. So that resume opens the door. Um, and the cover letter, I know that we don't always talk about that, but the cover letter in its basic terms covers the resume. So if the cover letter doesn't snap and pop, I'm never going to take it off and I'm never going to see the resume. So they go hand in hand. And that resume needs to be able to show your accomplishments. So often we write down some tasks. So when you were talking about how do we show our best self, it's about wordsmithing. So we like to see past tense action verbs, but ones we don't like to see are assisted with. So I ask a job seeker, well, did you do it? Did you conduct the new employee orientation? Well, yeah, sometimes, but I was part of a team. And I go, yeah, I know. But assisted, for all I know, it meant you handed out pencils. So if you conducted the new hire orientation, say that. And then I would say, Andrew, I see that you conducted new hire orientations. Can you tell me a little bit more? And that's when Andrew gets to say, well, I was actually part of a team and we traded off, but he still did it. So um, it's that magic of putting your accomplishments down, which is the hard part because we are self-effacing, but targeting that resume, that is the number one failure that we are so busy sending out applications and resumes, we forget that every single company needs to know that you want that job. They know in the back of their mind that you're applying other places, but as a hiring manager, when I have spent hours creating that job posting and the HR department has had to okay it and my manager had to say yes or whatever happened, I spent time putting that posting out there. So when I put out to the universe, what I want is I want the universe to bring it back to me. I've had people say, well, that's just like plagiarism. I mean, why would I say the same things they want? I said, well, you can say it differently. But if I'm asking for somebody who can schedule 15 executives and coordinate their calendars, that's what I'm looking for. So,
Well, and also, it's one of the things that is the dark underbelly of job seeking, or is these applicant tracking systems. And not everybody uses them, but these applicant tracking systems, which are scanning for keywords and key phrases, which, it's the number one frustration from job seekers that I hear from is they put their blood, sweat, and tears into these resumes and then they don't hear back. And it's usually because it didn't get ranked high enough by a computer. A human being probably never saw your resume. And that happens in many, many cases. And
I want to interrupt for a minute, Andrew, and just say that before computers, I was alive, oddly enough, and I had my own applicant tracking system right here.
yeah,
So the fact that it's online now does not change the picture dramatically. I looked for those same keywords as a human being. So when I was in banking, I was looking for people who had financial analysis. And when they didn't have anything to do with the job I had, they went right into the recycle pile. So, you can find those keywords and you don't have to be like keyword bingo on your resume, but that's how important that targeting is. So if I wanted somebody to create curriculum and you put that you developed, yeah, you're out,
Yeah.
because I have a different version of create versus develop. So it sounds like a game, and quite frankly, it is sort of a game, but it's one you can win.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I've looked at a lot of the research, and I'm a branding and marketing geek, and that was my background with Frontier Airlines. And when people get that aha moment where that resume is going to the top of the interview pile, it's usually because a couple of things are happening in the neurons of the brain. There's an emotional reaction to it, and there's a rational reaction to it. And then when you add the cover letter as well, where the cover letter is not a recitation of everything you've done on your resume, cover letter is personalized and shows that you've taken the research and you've done some work to make sure that there's a connection there between your past and what they are asking you to do. But the average time a recruiter is looking at resumes is less than 30 seconds before they're making decisions. It is so critical, and it's not only the keywords, but it's also how the information is organized on the resume, because the research has shown very clearly where the hot spots are on those resumes, where people are stopping and looking and making sure. And it's the typical kinds of things. I mean, dates, companies, job titles, things like that. But how it's organized in terms of like for example, I was working on a resume the other day, and somebody put all of their job titles, and then they below all of the job titles from all of their jobs, they put all of the things that they did. And so there is no way that somebody can make the connection between you did this for this, you did this for that. And it's an honest mistake from somebody who didn't know, but it can get tricky.
Yeah, we say it's the top third of the page. You have to get me at hello. If you get me at hello, then I'm not even concerned about any gaps in your job history or anything like that. I may not even be that excited about your education, but if you can get me in that top third, about 6.5 to 12 seconds for most hiring managers just to make the decision about whether you're going to be in the recycle pile or the interview pile. And then I'm going to look a little bit deeper. And I know that sounds frustrating and like, oh my God, why should I try? But it really is this opportunity to shine, putting together your professional skills summary and really being able to say, hey, look at me. This is why I make so much sense for this company, because I've done my research and I'm it. I've got everything you're looking for. And that's, I think, where that confidence builds and you get excited.
Yeah, I think having confidence in your resume is that first transfer point to confidence in everything else. So if you have a resume that you are looking at and you believe it and you're like, this is who I am and this is my brand statement, this is my brand promise, this is then that translates to how you talk about yourself. It translates to how you write your cover letters. It translates to your networking and your focus in terms of your job search. So, and again, it does kind of go back to answering that question, what do I want to do? But once I've seen the magic happen, when people have resumes that they are confident with. Let me ask you another question, and I get this a lot. And by the way, for folks who are listening, feel free to send us questions as well, because I know a lot about this stuff, but I don't know everything. And but I think between the two of us, we could probably have some pretty good answers. And if not, we will get back with you to let you know what we found out. Older job seekers. There's ageism that exists. I mean, let's just be honest. I think for the most part, it is not intentional. I think that cultures and companies they don't train to stop it, and but it's a tough thing for older job seekers. And older job seekers who typically they have more experience. They might be in higher level jobs where those higher level jobs don't exist as much. But it's a challenge, and I'm curious, how do you coach older job seekers? What I tell them not to do is to not dumb down their resumes and not dumb down to try and figure so that there's this game that no one's going to know how old I am. Well, I mean, guess what? You're going to go to an interview eventually, right? So,
Exactly.
it is challenging, and I struggle with this because I know that it's such a it's a big challenge for older job seekers.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I'm going to just sort of put a shout out to a mutual friend that we have, Andrew, Janine Vanderberg, who is part of the catalyst around changing the narrative. So we were fortunate at the
Yeah.
Jefferson Business and Workforce Center to have her speak virtually just earlier this week to our job seekers. So, one of the things is that absolutely there's ageism, but I want to make certain that we recognize that runs the gamut of generations. I have known people who've said, "Oh my God, if I have to have a millennial work for me, I'd rather, I'll do it myself." So we're seeing the whole spectrum, but let's talk about specifically the older experienced worker. Yeah, no reason to camouflage, and I think I can't take credit for this. I'll give it to Janine. She really did comment about one of the interesting things about age and what we're going through now with COVID-19 is that many individuals who may be in the 50 plus have already weathered 9/11. They have, and what happened, they've weathered the recession. So if you can begin to focus in on what skill set did you use as in those particular situations. So maybe you were in the nonprofit arena and the funding sources as they are today in COVID-19. Did you increase funding? How did you do that? Maybe you also were working with people remotely. Things that are happening today, in some cases, happened in other times. So, can you pull that together and make sense out of that? What we want to talk about is the value that we bring. And Janine makes a great point through changing the narrative is that the reality is that what we want to do is we want to encourage companies to recognize that, and there's quite a bit of information out there about the increased productivity when you have teams of multi generations. So we see that a team of young people versus a team of older people, they operate at the same productivity level. There's no big nothing, no woohoo. But when those teams combine, it is the synergy of the intergenerational that ups the productivity. So as you begin to look at where can I bring my expertise and my value, we really want to stop our own um, narrative where we say things like, "Oh, I'm having a senior moment," or "Oh my gosh, I probably am overqualified," or "Oh,
Right.
I really don't know how to use technology." If there was ever a time to upskill, it's now. If you're sheltering at home, my gosh, get those computer skills tuned up. Um, Andrew and I are learning WebEx. We learned Zoom. We had to do it on a dime. It was a moving target. So we can learn all of these things. And if you figured out WebEx, it's not a real friendly group of software application, but you're on today. So, wow, you got a new skill. And I'm not being facetious, but I think it's the way that we approach this is recognizing that we sometimes are our own worst enemy. We've got to get out of our own way. So I call it the invisible hand, which is, oh, now that I'm in the interview, the invisible hand says, "Oh, don't hire me. You just figured out I'm not 22." Well, I figured that out earlier because your expertise and your experience. So if you got the interview, then chances are you absolutely have the skill set they're looking for. The age is going to be your own bugaboo. Go in with the confidence and the excitement and no red flags of, "Oh my gosh, I bet you didn't realize that I was, 55." Why would you say that? I can see you. I think that the other piece of the puzzle is really sitting back and thinking about that those areas of expertise that make you valuable. Are you many people over 55 possibly have better, I call them essential skills, other people call them soft skills, than younger generations do. So the fact is that you know how to convene people, you know how to develop staff. A lot of things that aren't necessarily skill sets of individuals who are younger. I think the cautionary tale is that we can't go in and be arrogant about our value and our experience and say, well, I could run circles around you based on what I know. But you can certainly position yourself and brand yourself as valuable, as somebody with expertise. Perhaps you have more flexibility, but what have you done in your life that sort of looks like what you might need to do in the future? And so if I could just take one more second on this, Andrew, what Janine was saying, and I think is so beautiful, is that this is an amazing moment, as scary as it is, to be thinking about the future of work. So there are many companies that have said over and over again, and you and I talked about this a few nights ago, oh my God, no remote work. I can't trust people. How will I know what they're doing? They'll never go remote.
Yeah.
Go through absolutely out of our control. Many of us are working remote. So this is, again, a new skill. How have you managed your time? What projects have you been able to do remotely that you couldn't do? So upskill in that, but look to the future of work. What will companies go back to being what they were? I doubt it. So what do you bring to the table? Can you manage agendas? Can you manage meetings remotely? Can you convene people? Can you use a technology? So,
well, and I think also one of the things that mature job seekers bring to the table that is going to be really needed right now is leadership and leadership skills that have been developed over time. Now, it lends itself to the other flip side of the coin, which is, as a younger professional, when I was a younger professional, I never thought what I would be doing in 20 or 30 years. And today, I see it all the time, and I'm not being judgmental about it. It's very just the reality is that younger job seekers are bouncing around, every 3 years they take a new job and they're looking for new opportunities. And a lot of that is economic, and a lot of that is just because, there's a lot of growth in companies and startups and things like that. But I did read an article, it was from a Stanford professor a couple of years ago, and he was talking about how leadership skills are one of those things that sustain professionals throughout their careers. And it's one of those things that you become a manager, you become a leader. It's one of those things that you can have on your resume, and that is it's an important thing. So what I'm saying is that as young professionals, is to find those opportunities for leadership and for management. You might be really good at just one certain thing or one certain skill, but asking your HR department, asking your boss, what else can I do to, engage and get more of those types of skills? Are there other skills like that you would recommend to young professionals that they get as they move forward?
Yeah, I think part of it is perhaps becoming a generalist. We went through a period of time where being a specialist was a really good idea. But I think that being a generalist, so sometimes there aren't upward mobility opportunities in companies, but there are opportunities to be a horizontal versus vertical. So you can see if there's something that another department is doing that maybe you have some time that you could be part of that project, or you could get to know a little bit more about what some other division does. So building your skill set instead of building up, but building across is, I think, one of the major opportunities for young job seekers.
Yeah. So we've been going for about an hour now, and I want to ask, there's a lot of, we could go for 4 or 5 hours. There's a lot to know, but I do want to open it up for people who want to ask questions. Before I do that, I just need to do a little housekeeping here. Kids, I really need some time I'll make you a hamburger as soon as we're done. Okay, buddy? I love you. Okay. So sorry about that.
All right.
I want to see, are there any other people out there who have questions that we can help address?
One question was posed, Andrew, about how does a person who feels like they don't know anybody get started with networking? And we get that, and I'm sure you have too. I just moved to town. I don't know anybody.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. And I hear a lot of that from people who have been hunkered down in their cubicle, and they don't know anybody in their own town or their own city, and that happens. Here's my recommendation, and then I want to hear yours as well. I usually break it down into three tiers or three different buckets. So the first tier is people that you know, that people that know you, people that are your cheerleaders. They're the people that you have worked with. They might be former clients, they might be former vendors, they might be former bosses. Those are the people that are your first tier of networking contacts. They're the folks that you know are not only going to call you back, but they're going to actually be advocates for you. They're going to open up their Rolodexes and say, here's names of people you should call. If they're working in a different company, they're going to take your resume and bring it down to the HR person, but they're going to be very helpful. And here's before we even get into those three tiers, though, I think one of the key messages about networking that kind of gives people the icks is they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed to talk about it. They're like, it's almost like, we need to get over this idea that being unemployed is somehow shameful or something you need to be embarrassed about. It absolutely is not. Everybody you talk to has been in your shoes before. They have had to look for a job. They've had to go through this, and this is just how it is. So there's nothing to be ashamed about. Some people, they tell me they don't know what to say when they're networking or when they're making cold calls. What I recommend is, number one, you got to practice talking about yourself under any circumstance. For interviews, connections that you're making at mixers or whatever, you need to practice. And some people, they said, "Oh, I'm so tired of talking about myself." You got to get used to it. That's okay, but it's your stump speech. It's the thing that you're going to talk to people and let them know what exactly you are looking for, and be willing to have that conversation. If you do feel uncomfortable, like for example on cold calls, then write out a script. Just have a script ready to go. Now, your second tier of networking are people that you know. They're your acquaintances. They're folks that it might be the parents on your kid's little league team. It might be somebody at church. It might be your next door neighbor who works at a company that you're excited about. They've never worked with you, but they know you well enough that you're going to be able to make some calls and get some response. And then the third tier is going to be the cold call. And again, this is people that you call up, and even for informational interviews, the person who asked earlier, I don't know what I want to do. Go talk to some folks about some interests that you have and ask them into your career. What were the steps that you took to get there, and what would you recommend for me? Now, the cold call is obviously, you might not get calls back right away, and that's okay though. I know it seems like another level of rejection, but it's not. It's okay. I worked with this one sales guy, award-winning sales guy, and he told me I made 20 calls in the last 2 weeks, and I only got 6 calls back. And I looked at him and I said, "You're in sales, right?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "If you had 20 prospects and you called all 20 and 6 of them got back with you, what would you call that?" So that'd be a home run. And so again, it goes back to this idea. Some of the basic marketing sales techniques that you have to understand is that any call back, any opportunity you have to talk with somebody, you need to be ready to go. And then the most critical thing I would say about networking is make the ask. There has to be an ask attached to any conversation you have where you can influence somebody's ability to give you a job or get you a job. Can you introduce me to your HR person? Can you take my resume, give it a good look, and I'll call you back? Can you open up your Rolodex? There's a lot of different ways you can make people become involved in your job search. Because otherwise, a lot of people will say, "Oh, this is a great resume, thank you very much." But if you ask them to do something for you, that's a whole different situation, because now they're becoming committed to your job search.
And Andrew, I'd say a couple things with that. I'm also a believer in not only the ask, but what can you do for the other person? So sometimes it's reaching out to your network and just checking in. I really believe, as sad as this may sound, but COVID-19 is a perfect storm for you to reconnect with people, because it's just a starting out with a connection of, Larry, hope you and your family are well. We haven't connected for a long time. Let me know how things are going. Larry responds to me. I write back and say, "Gosh, so glad to hear." Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. COVID-19 has taken its toll on me. Fortunately, not my health, but my job. So I'm looking for XYZ. So I start the conversation first by my interest in care for the people in my network, but I also then I go for the ask. You know, what do you know out there? The other
Yeah.
thing I will say, and I don't get a commission for this, but I believe in LinkedIn. I believe in
Yeah, totally.
networking virtually. And with that, this is a great time for you to refresh your LinkedIn. So take some time with that. Take a look, find some people in your network that you really think, wow, I love their LinkedIn pages. Reach out to them for their advice, but use those tools because again, we can't, social distancing doesn't allow us to do a lot of networking face to face. But once that changes, another thing that I think you and I talked about, Andrew, were meetup groups. I mean,
Yeah.
or volunteering. So when people can see you in your element, not as a job seeker, but maybe as a master gardener, or maybe you're a meetup group because you like to pair wines with French food, whatever the case may be, you're in showing your very best self. You're showing that self that is excited and passionate. That then turns into an opportunity where someone says, so by the way, I forgot to ask you, what do you do for a living? And you say, oh, I'm in transition. I'm really looking for X. Well, they liked you first, and now they like you even more because they want to help you because you're a job seeker. So that networking is the be all end all for me.
Yeah, completely. And I'll tell you the other thing, and we're talking about free resources. A lot of people don't realize that their colleges, the universities, I know somebody's on here from the University of Denver. They have alumni groups that are specific to job seekers. And so there's seminars, there's get-togethers, and a lot of times, even if you're not living in the town where you went to college, there's alumni groups that exist within cities across America. And usually, but colleges have a lot of colleges have done some really amazing things in terms of connecting alumni into their career services areas as well. I just did a seminar with Metro State University this past week, and there was a bunch of alumni from Metro State that are now faced with, the situation relating to COVID-19 as well. So that's another really good free resource. And as you talked about LinkedIn, don't forget the networking groups on LinkedIn too, because a lot of times I've seen this happen many times where recruiters will not post a job on LinkedIn, but they will go into the groups that are specifically tailored for a job because they know that that's where people are hanging out. And Indeed also has an opportunity for you to put your resume on there, and that employers can find you that way. And on my website as well, you can post a profile as well. The reverse job search has been a thing that's been going on for a while now, but recruiters are out there looking. And just as when you're submitting your resume, you want your LinkedIn profile to give those people that brand aha moment so that they're immediately drawn to you and want to, give you a call.
Andrew, if I could put a plug in for your jobs list, one of the things that I always encourage job seekers to do is to look at your jobs list in two different ways. The first way is with your beverage of choice, just out of curiosity. What kind of jobs are out there? Who's hiring? Oftentimes we find that people are calling a position a certain name that we don't know. So Google, I think, came up with a certain name for HR people that is certain, something like personnel operations poobah or something. I would never research that. I wouldn't even know that that's what it's called. So I like people to go through your jobs list to just see what are they calling things and what are those skills attached to those things that I didn't know there was even a job out there. And then I say, give it a couple days to percolate, go back into your to the jobs list and start now saying, wow, that company, I want to know more about that company. Do your company research on LinkedIn or on their own website and figure out, is that one of my five? It is. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to ask you the questions that has been posed by one of our attendees. I'm the entire marketing department for a very small company. How do I leverage a small amount of experience in a lot of different things to get a job at a larger company? It feels like my limited experience limits me. In parens, no experience with specialized software and larger budgets.
Oh, it's a great question, and it's funny. Like the person who's been working in nonprofit world that wants to go into corporate, and I'm always impressed because I know what it's like to work for a nonprofit when you have different hats and you have to do many different things because of limited budgets and limited people. And I think it's in a very similar situation here is that, being able to put your top skills and make sure that you are 100% ready to tell your stories. Storytelling is such a critical part of the job search. And it's really going to be up to you to make the connection as to why your background and your skills make sense to any company. And I think and I haven't seen your resume, but I think from what you're talking about, you probably have some really amazing stories about what you've had to do all by yourself or with very limited support. And that's critical. I mean, that's a valuable experience that I think can really translate to a lot of people to show them what you're made of, and the fact that you've been able to do so many different things in such with limited resources like that. And again, but get ready to tell your stories. Like that question that you get at the beginning of every interview is called it's what can you tell me about yourself? And it scares the hell out of people. But it's also the best opportunity to take control of the interview and be able to immediately start directing the interview to what it is that makes you tick. Not just a litany of skills, but let me tell you why my boss trusted me. And that tells a lot about me. Let me tell you why I got promoted. Let me explain to you about this project I had that I had limited resources, but I increased sales by 35% as a result of it. I mean, those are the kinds of stories that are going to just grip people. And it's a perfect way to begin answering that question. Can you tell me about yourself? Because, they've got your resume. They know what you are saying in terms of your skills. What they want is this connection. And again, it's this branding kind of emotional connection that people want to get. They say that when you get even on the best resume, people get you at about 75%. The other 25% they're going to get through the interviews, the storytelling, and things like that. But I think I love people who come to me with positions like that because they're, and she was saying, or he, I don't know if it was a he or she, but it's this idea that you immediately go to this place where I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have that, I'm worried, I'm scared, as opposed to I've got this, I've got that, I did this, I did that. And again, it goes back to this idea where I call it the stinking thinking. And I'm not being judgmental here. It's a very common thing where it's like we're immediately scared, or we've come up with this story that is not really true, or we've watered it down, or we've taken away the juicy parts that made you who you were.
Couldn't agree more. Andrew, we're at 12:11. We probably have some hungry kids at your house wanting those hamburgers. And I want to thank you again for this opportunity to sing the praises of the team that I'm part of at Jefferson County Business and Workforce Center, and can't say enough about what you do with that amazing job board and the opportunity for people to get a resume tune-up. So.
Well, and thank you. And again, for everyone who's watching, make sure you look up all of the opportunities and the resources that the workforce centers across the state provide. Jefferson County, I think, just does an exemplary job. And again, these are free resources. It's resume writing, it's job consulting. When the resource center or when the workforce center gets back up and running, they have job fairs, they have meet and greets with employers. I mean, there's so much that goes on, and it's all free. I mean, this is all our tax dollars at work, just working to employ Coloradans across the state. So thank you very much again. Again, if people have a question of me or of CJ, just email me at ahudson@ahjobslist.com, and I'll make sure and share that with CJ. Also, keep alert, because I'm going to be having some more of these seminars over the next few weeks as we start to hopefully get back to normal. But thanks again, and thanks for everyone for being here.
Have a great week.
You too.